Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 616, Pay Them Double. December 7th, 2020. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Well, science has delivered. A vaccine is here. But now comes a task nearly as hard as the development itself. Convincing people to take it. So how can marketers help in the coming months? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, whether the social networks are commoditizing their platforms, Netflix is a nascent marketing powerhouse, food and kid influence, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the author of Now What? A Survivor's Guide for Thriving Through Mergers and Acquisitions, the founder of Day One Ready Consulting, Ms. Jennifer Fondrevay. Jennifer, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me back.
Always my pleasure. Now, also with us, we have the author of 5 books, including his latest, Built to Suck, the host of Corona TV, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Joe, how are you?
Hello, Bob. I'm always happy when I'm on your show.
That's great. Now, next, she's the CEO of Twit.tv. We welcome back Ms. Lisa Laporte. Lisa, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Bob. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. And finally, we have the Executive Vice President of Business Intelligence for the Golan Group, Mr. Colby Vogt. Colby, I try to say this again. Colby Vogt. Colby, how are you? Sorry, I tripped over your name there.
It's great. No problem, Bob. I'm doing well and looking forward to the chat.
Well, we have a big topic right off the bat that I want to get into, and it's not typical marketing talk. As of right now, we have at least 2 vaccines against COVID beginning the initial rollout plans. And now the conversation has shifted from distribution to how to convince people to take the thing. Now, much of this effort will fall upon marketers and PR practitioners to formulate compelling messaging, is what I'm assuming. So, Joe, let's get into this. Vaccine compliance is fraught with issues in the best of circumstances, but this one is doubly so because of the amount of misinformation, complexity of availability, the timing of a 2-shot regimen, the storage of this incredibly difficult to manufacture medicine. How do we even start to convince people that this thing is safe and ready to go when really we're still shooting in the dark ourselves? What do you think?
Well, I actually think this is 1,000% a marketing topic, and I want to thank you for giving it to me because in looking at some of the source articles and thinking about this topic, I realize what an opportunity and what a massive responsibility we, the marketing and advertising world, has. Now, I'm going to just give you a little bit of context. First of all, 60% of American adults at the moment say that they would get the vaccine. And in a Pew survey, only 42% of Black adults are inclined to be vaccinated. And of course, we all know that COVID has really devastated the African American community. So there's a clear disconnect or chasm that has to be crossed. Now, what's amazing when you think about it is that when you look at the Ad Council's history, going back to Smokey Bears, remember only you can prevent forest fires, loose lips sink ships during World War II, and friends don't let friends drive drunk. We probably could add, this is your brain on drugs with a fried egg.
Let's not. The war on drugs is not a good thing.
But Ad Council in particular has always been at the forefront of issues and being able to create iconic, persuasive, effective campaigns. But right now, if you were to just go back and think about the ad council's effort and the marketing community's effort with respect to wear a mask, socially distance, wash your hands, abysmal. And here's the thing that just blew me away. This is apparently a $50 million campaign that the ad council is about to launch. And I'm going to quote, "It's our moonshot moment." Like, this is not a moonshot moment. This should be a Rubicon moment. You know, I mean, as a bit of context, $8 billion was spent on advertising during the recent 2020 election. $8 billion. $8 billion being spent on advertising on a political election, which arguably doesn't even work, the advertising, and only $50 million is being invested into what is probably one of the, maybe arguably the most important campaign ever to come out of the ad council. So the opportunity is enormous. And also, just if you think about what marketing could be doing here in terms of influencer outreach, in terms of celebrity endorsements, you know, it goes back to, again, historically, Elvis Presley, who publicly received the polio vaccine in 1956, right? Or the fact that we've heard that Clinton, Bush, and Obama are all going to publicly take the vaccine. There is we have an ice bucket challenge type of moment ahead of us if we take the opportunity, because we all know that if we don't get 60 or 70 or 80% of the population to be vaccinated, the efficacy of doing this is not necessarily going to be lived up to. So I actually think that this is a time now where not only the ad council has to come to the party, but every single freaking brand has got to be able to say, we're going to give up our media. We're going to donate our media. We're going to turn this into a $500 million, or quite frankly, a $5 billion campaign to make sure that when we do our jobs well and best, with all the creativity and all the strategic prowess that we have the ability right now to help turn this country and even the world around when it comes to kind of getting out of this dark period.
Yeah,
So
I'm glad you brought this.
This is a marketing topic.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. I mean, especially about the ad council and the role that brands can play in this. And I want to bring in the rest of the group. Lisa, what are your thoughts about what Joe just proposed, that brands should give up their media in favor of promoting the vaccine? I mean, it sounds like a really smart thing to do. It sounds like the right thing to do. My question is, will it happen?
Oh, I think it'll happen this time around. I think everybody needs to put in some time for the public service. I mean, take a look. Amazon recorded record profits this year. So why can't they give back to the communities to doing it? I agree with, Joe on this topic, because not only do politicians, but you got to also remember, we've hurt the Black community by doing tests on them from the 40s through the 70s, and not even like with their full consent. If you go back and look at the history of testing vaccinations on other people in this country, we've done a poor job of being upfront and educating people. So I would love to see not only brands putting their money where their mouth is, but brands such as athletes getting in communities and doing it. But this goes beyond politicians, movie stars, and athletes, etc. I think everybody in their community needs to be proactive, get out there, show how it's done. And you bet I'm going to have time on our network if we can add to it and help run some of these ads as well, because we want to see everybody get vaccinated. So it's going to really take this huge education, and we're going to have to go beyond just spending money on it. We all have to be talking about it. We all also have to be talking about, how you're going to feel after you take the vaccine. I mean, the reality is, if it's 95% effective, you're going to get sick after getting a shot, and that needs to be communicated so people aren't fearful to come back. So I agree with Joe on this. But it's going to take more than just brands. It's going to take everybody, community leaders, and specifically people talking to people of color and other communities that are scared because, and they have a right to be given the history, but we have to bring in their community leaders and help them overcome their fears and get everybody vaccinated.
My concern with all this is less about whether or not we're going to get involved, but more about what the message is that we're going to be putting out into the marketplace. And Colby, that's a big concern for all of us, and all of us that we should be having, is marketers don't always get it right. And we focus on trying to get people to go get the vaccine instead of realizing that there's this grand opportunity right now where only the doctors and seriously compromised patients are going to be getting this thing first. Shouldn't marketing start now and focus on these individuals and get testimonials and build up to the big moment where everybody can get a vaccine? It seems like this is going to be wasted time if we don't get this going right now.
Yeah, so first, I just want to reiterate the fact that I think Joe is spot on, that this is absolutely a marketing issue. The only difference of opinion I have is that I don't think it's a matter of asking brands to donate or give up their media time. Like, it's in brands' interest to have everyone out on the streets and back in restaurants and stores and all these things. So
Yeah.
I don't even think it's a matter of donating for society's good. It's spending the money wisely to get your customers back. So that's just my first thought. In terms of the timing, Bob, that I think you're asking about, I think with every marketing campaign, there's a question of, how much do you have a buildup of the anticipation? How much do you time it right at the launch when something's available? I think these are really important questions. I'm not going to pretend to know the answer right now but what I would want to do is I'd want to do a lot of testing to find out, because my fear would be potentially, if you've got a lot of buildup and you get people that are like, okay, I'm ready, and then they start going to places where they think they can get the vaccine and it's not available, that may also be disenfranchising. So
but consider
I want to study how people are going to respond to both a buildup and or a big splash when it's ready, just before I make that decision.
Well, consider the fact that maybe it's not a buildup per se, but it's you got to think about what the decision process is, what the decision calculus is for coming up with, I'm going to get this vaccine. And it's less like buying toothpaste and more like buying a car. It's just like your health is serious. So you're going to take serious consideration for it. So you're going to want to watch what happens to the people who get it early. And since so few people are going to get it early, it's important to focus on them during this time period and assure people over this decision process that this is safe, that this has efficacy, that it's not going to cause you problems. I mean, these are important parts in the decision process. It's not waiting till April when it's suddenly widely available and going, everybody should get it, because you're never going to convince people that way.
Well, first of all, I mean, Colby's 100% correct, which is this isn't just common sense; it's good business sense, and it works both ways. I mean, whether brands are doing it for altruistic or selfish reasons, we don't care; just do it. But the second thing is, it strikes me. I mean, your point, Bob, I think is taken as well. That what the key to this is transparency. And we marketers, we know we could deconstruct this with our eyes closed. This is like taking candy from a baby in terms of what it takes to be able to instead of creating the photoshopped or the retouched message, the answer is raw, accurate, truthful, transparent messaging and follow up and follow through. Now, I was thinking, right now, all you got to do is combine a bit of influencer marketing with, look at this explosion of streaming. I mean, look at what I'm doing for a living, what Lisa does for a living. I would take the vaccine on air on my show and follow up every single day to say how I was feeling. And imagine how many people there are out there that have streaming shows. So it's not, in addition to that, we need Savannah Guthrie and we need every single anchor to be not only taking the vaccine, but showing themselves every day, even if they're going through a bit of a rough patch. But ultimately, this is not about telling. This is about showing. This is about doing. And that is the strategy. And I think, some people are going to feel a little grim, but that's okay. They're going to be fine. And of course, if they aren't fine, then we're all in bigger trouble. But let's assume that scenario is not going to happen. So this is how this isn't about just advertising. This is about messaging and doing it in a consistent, comprehensive and and very, very transparent manner.
And Bob, this is Jennifer. There's just one point that I would add in your question of, well, what do we do now until the vaccine comes out? And I think Lisa highlighted it well. It's about educating the public. And I think Lisa said it too. I worry that celebrities, news anchors, politicians won't be the persuasive influencers, but doctors, healthcare workers, educating people on the power of vaccinations. And I think that the misinformation is already strong, but the other issue is that you had a lobby of non-vaccination, already before COVID came out. And so you have to battle against that. And I think Lisa's point about we've got to educate people on the power of vaccinations, that's something we can do now, even in advance of, Biden, Obama, whoever getting the vaccination, is to demystify what unfortunately has come about the power of vaccinations. That is what we can start doing today, even before this vaccine comes out.
Let me ask you a question. Let me follow up on that, because you mentioned that we need less politicians, fewer politicians, more doctors. And I'm wondering, is that the better strategy, or is it better to focus on the patients themselves and focus on the individuals?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. The reason why I go to doctors is the most compelling and powerful messages that I have seen around this pandemic are when you are talking to the people on the front lines who have seen the issues. And so a patient and doctor testimonial that talks about how a vaccine helped them, the power of that. I couldn't agree more with Lisa's comment. Is there's a lot of education that needs to be done to frankly beat back the negative coverage that has happened around vaccinations in general, because I think that is feeding the misinformation.
What do you guys see as being the biggest communications roadblocks? Is it the fact that there's an anti-vaxxer movement out there that's going to be pushing against it? Is it the fact that Trump was involved with the initial vaccine and people distrust him widely across this country? It's just like, what are the biggest communication roadblocks that you see, and how do we overcome them? Joe, you want to start?
Well, I'll go last. Have the others go, and then I'll come back.
Okay. Well, Lisa, any thoughts on the big roadblocks?
Yeah, my biggest concern is that all the misinformation that's flying out there already with regards to vaccines. I think we need to be open and honest about how they are. I mean, to be completely upfront, I just was at the doctor's office a couple weeks ago, and she asked me if I wanted to get the shingles vaccine because I'm over 50, and I said, well, yeah, sure. Tell me a little about it. She goes, we have to get 2 shots. They're 3 months apart, very similar to what we're going to do with COVID, and it's 95% effective. So she said you might feel ill, for 24 hours. And I went, oh, okay, great. The nurse walks in and I go, how bad is it? And she goes, oh, I did this 3 months ago and I felt like horrible for 24 hours. And I thought, okay, we'll see how it goes. I had it in the morning. I went to bed at 9 o'clock at night. I felt okay. I woke up at 11, full fever, 102 fever, shakes, full flu-like symptoms, exactly what the doctor said might happen. That lasted 24 hours. So what I'd like to really see with this vaccine, because if it's that effective too, and I've been doing a lot more research on this, I think we need to be open and honest with people. Yes, you can feel very sick. I was actually watching the news the other night, and 2 doctors participated in a trial, and one actually received the vaccine. They're married, and the husband did not get it. Well, she woke up with flu-like symptoms and had all these problems. Then they tested a few weeks later and they found out she actually got the COVID vaccination, whereas he didn't. So I really feel that if we're not fully transparent and honest and upfront and educating people, I think it's doctors, frontline workers, athletes, everyone, but it's also community leaders. We need to get churches involved. We need to get everybody and communities involved to educate everyone, but you got to be honest about it. You're not going to feel great, or you might not feel great. That really needs to be in full disclosure. So I really think our biggest challenge is going to be misinformation, the anti-vaxxers that run away scared, or honestly, people getting that first shot and then not wanting to go back to get the next one. Trust me, I have to get my next one in 3 months, and I'm a little like, whoa, that wasn't fun. But at least I know what to expect when I get it.
And
so I really
compliance
feel that
is
open and honest communication is going to be the best thing, and we have to avoid all the misinformation out there.
compliance, which is the buzzword in the pharmaceutical industry for getting medicine delivered on time, is one of the most difficult things that pharmaceutical companies deal with. I mean, trying to make sure that people stay on the regimen. And that's my biggest concern with what's going on with this particular, well, these two now vaccines that are been that are going through process right now. There's a third that's not quite ready for prime time, but my biggest concern is just getting into that mindset of having to take that second vaccine, the second shot, and making sure it happens on time with a drug that's already difficult to transport and difficult to store. I mean,
but those are logistics, right? Those are logistics, and they're not.
But they're not
minimizing.
logistics.
No,
They are. It's logistics getting it to the doctor's office, but it's pretty much behavior modification to get the patient into the office on time to get that second shot. That's a whole different.
I hear you. I'm saying that in terms of how to make it happen, right? Whether we're thinking supply chain, or when I say logistics in terms of the mechanics, that's one thing. But the bridge between what you said and what we're discussing, behavior. I mean, again, behavior modification, influence, perception, the ability to inform, persuade, and remind are the three fundamental roles for advertising. And that's why I'm saying this is actually the moment, for the beleaguered 30-second spot, right? And advertising to demonstrate that not only it can work, but it can actually do good. It can save, if we applied a complete wartime mentality approach to this. And that's why, back to what Lisa was saying, which is what we were discussing, whether you call it education, or clearly countering not just the misinformation, but also the weaponization and the politicization of all of this. What we really have to do, ironically, is we have to, I might be contradicting myself slightly, but we have to almost bypass the media as well. I mean, I'm not saying bypass advertising. I'm saying bypass the media. We have to make sure that in this case, the messenger is the media, right? Not the medium is the message. The messenger is the media. And that requires the honesty and the transparency of being able to create an army of people that say, we will take this and we will share every single thing that we're going through. And by the way, it's the answer to everything here is yes, and it's doctors, it's celebrities, it's influencers, it's average people, it's anybody that's prepared to share their story. And guess what we have at our disposal? These little things called mobile phones and social media. So it's like, shame on us if we can't figure this thing out, because this is the biggest challenge that we've ever been faced in our lifetimes. And it's actually the easiest thing to accomplish if we actually use all the tools at our disposal.
Let me ask you this one last question to the group. There's two ways you can take this. You can take this as a unified ad campaign where everybody's donating media to the federal government, and there's one source of advertising, there's one source of opportunity being communicated out to the marketplace. Or we can have a coordinated effort where brands do their part. Yeah, everybody has a set of talking points, but brands can create their own messages. Cities, states, local governments can create their own messages. And which is the better approach? I mean, should we trust everything with the federal government right now to unify that message, or should we just simply coordinate and allow everybody to have a voice on trying to convince their particular share of the market to go and get vaccinated?
Well, just to jump in, I want to build on what Joe said. I think we do need to have a wartime mentality. And for me, the coordinated effort because trying to have it all go through the government, my worry would be it just gets bogged down in bureaucracy. And I think as long as everyone's clear, you mentioned, talking points. For me, it's just, if you have a wartime-like mentality about this and the importance of this message and rallying around it to make sure that the right information gets out and that people are educated on the potential benefits of it, I think if we look at it as if we're in war, because we are, that I think then helps galvanize people to do the right thing and not have it all funnel through one central group. That would be my worry, that it would get bogged down.
I'd also be worried that people already don't trust our government. So you're going to alienate a lot of people if you try to funnel it through one program. I think if everybody's operating off of the same points that have to get across and they're able to reach communities differently, I think that makes more sense too.
Well, this has been an interesting, fascinating conversation, but we got to move on. I want to talk next about social media. It seems like every time a cool new social media feature emerges, everyone else in the marketplace copies it, which is fine. I understand that's the way business works. It's fine once or twice. But once we end up with 4 or 5 services with exactly the same features, 4 or 5 different services with 4 or 5 different features that are all the same, the services begin to blend together and they each lose differentiation, which is an important thing from 101 marketing. We need to always differentiate our brands. So, Jennifer, is social as a whole losing some of its brand identity, becoming an amorphous blob? And if so, how can the social platforms survive? Can they survive without a unique brand identity? Or is it okay to be an amorphous blob and just have everybody in a commoditized state? What's your thoughts?
So first, I want to say I'm so tempted. I saw an interview the other day where the news anchor was asking someone a question, and all they did was answer in monosyllabic yes, no. So I was so tempted, Bob, to just say no, social will not become an amorphous blob. And yes, size does determine the eventual outcome, and leave it at that.
You'd be just like Jonathan Sackett. Jonathan always shows up and does that to me.
More robust discussion. So I don't think that social becomes an amorphous blob. What is fascinating to me, though, is how our tech giants have just boomed in this year. I think it was Lisa that referenced, if you just look at some of the numbers that, whether it's Amazon or Google or even Snapchat, for Christ's sakes, it's fascinating to me how social has pivoted in this time because people are trapped at home and just online so much. I do believe that size does determine the eventual outcome, but for me, the key thing in the copycat service scenario, if you just look at, because the one I think we have some of the longest history on is Snapchat, right? Debuted in 2011, came out with stories that disappeared in 24 hours and got copied pretty quickly by Instagram, and was, the death knell was being told, I think, in 2018 for Snapchat. It had been at 31 billion valuation and down to 8 billion in 2018. And just in October for its third quarter results is now valued at 50 billion. So for me, the key in the social media network that I've seen for those who are just thriving is not only do they know their target, but they stay not only a step ahead, but they're not just purely resting on the first thing that they came out with and are known for, right? Snapchat came out with the stories initially and then Instagram copied it, but now actually it's doing well because it has continued to evolve. I think its greatest play this year has been around digital content around sports and being able to provide the kind of content that users are interested in. And secondly, they've pivoted with their market. They went from just being millennial oriented to now are Gen Z. And the last thing I saw was, 75% of 13 to 34-year-olds use Snapchat. So for me, I think the social media platforms, the ones who continue to just thrive are because they don't just stick with the one thing that they launched with, but continue to evolve and come out with new applications. I mean, does anyone remember when Facebook was for, college kids to be able to hook up and network with one another, and now they're going after businesses.
Yes,
Now
we're all old on this
they're
call. We're all
we think of them as a social media network, and they think of themselves as a small business enabler. And so, for me, the fascinating thing is it's not based on what users think of the social network. It's how they see themselves, and they consider, their competitive framework a lot larger. So I don't think it's going to become an amorphous blob, and scale to me is key.
So, so what I'm gathering from what you said, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but essentially what you're saying is that the brand differentiation isn't as important at the feature level. It's just as important at the user level. Am I hearing you right? Like, in other words, the people who, the identity of the people who...
Instagram copied Snapchat. I'll just use that as the ongoing example. They copied them, but Snapchat still has an edge because the feature, it's simpler, it's easier to use. So it is that user interaction that allows them to stay ahead, but they've equally come out with new content that's in line with what their user base is looking for.
Colby, would you agree with that sentiment? What's your thoughts on that? Because, you read marketing textbooks and they go back to the core differentiation being so important. But what Jennifer's saying makes a lot of sense as well, that the differentiation doesn't need to be on the feature set. Sometimes the differentiation is simply, this is where my friends are right now, and this is where I'm going to hang out.
Yeah, I think I agree. And so I certainly agree. Knowing your audience and being relevant to that audience is probably the number one task that any brand, whether it be, a product or social media channel, that's their number one objective, right? And so that, I think, certainly exists. But I think there's more to that. I don't think that there's not room for new innovation. I mean, I don't know how long TikTok's been around. I think for a few years now, but they found their niche, and Instagram at the time had their niche, and Snapchat had their niche. Twitter has a niche. I do think there is something that is your front foot. I think, of course, all these social media platforms get jealous when someone new comes and innovates and says, "Oh my gosh, we can do that too." But I think that the social media, whether it's Snapchat or TikTok or whoever that innovated, they get to win for that niche, and that becomes their front foot. And I still think it's a differentiator. So I think it's a little of both. I think there is a customer understanding, and I think there is still, if you're the first to market with a new way of thinking about social media, Pinterest still has a place. YouTube has a place. Like, they all have a place, and if you think about each of them, there's always one thing where they came in and disrupted and did something differently. And even if people copy them, I think most consumers know that if you really want to consume video content, you probably still go start at YouTube. Yes, other channels also offer video content, but I still think there's a first to market that wins for something that's different.
I would agree with you on almost every sense, almost every case, with the exception of Snapchat in particular, because when Instagram stole stories and then Facebook stole stories and now everybody's stealing stories, nobody thinks about Snapchat about stories anymore. It's mainly about communicating with your friends. You communicate and you do these, basically you send a Snapchat to somebody, and that's the way people use it. I mean, you have a bunch of influencers are out there who are still doing the stories and still actively involved, but quite frankly, Instagram does stories better than Snapchat from all accounts.
But Bob, what I would say there, though, and that's the reason why I use Snapchat as an example, is Instagram copied them several times, stories, and then they also did filters. Remember, Snapchat was the first one to come out with filters where you could put dog ears or rainbow.
Well, they weren't even the first. They weren't even the first. They weren't even the first. They were like maybe third to market with that.
They have continued to, particularly with Gen Z, right? They know their target, they play to that audience, and they continue to come out with new content that plays to that. So I agree, particularly because copycatting, in tech, I think they all have to assume this is a feature that's going to get copied at some point. So they need to stay a step ahead and be really in line with how do they best serve their audience.
I heard someone else trying to jump in. I wasn't sure. Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, it's funny. When I read this last night, let me add this. I don't really feel that any social media platform is the exact same. So to be a little more contrary, when I read this, I just thought to myself, well, you can't be anonymous on Facebook or Instagram. You can be on Twitter. I use LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. That's like my work one. I have really good news feeds on that. So I think it's interesting that yes, there's things that have copied all across the board to different social media platforms, but I don't feel that they're all exactly the same. I think they have different things or they appeal to different people. So I don't mind them stealing some of the services, because I did like that on Snapchat. Now it's on Instagram, and I don't use Snapchat anymore because I prefer Instagram. And, I still go to Twitter for specific things, but I know there's more trolling there, and there's, anonymity, and there's things like that there. So I don't really feel that all of these services are really the exact same and have all the same features any way I look at it. So I'm okay with them stealing from each other. And, I honestly do feel that size will determine the outcome eventually, or in use, size and use.
I agree. I agree with Lisa, and I think that it's almost like the price of entry is, oh damn, well I suppose we need that as well. So for example, Instagram has Reels, which is their TikTok copy, but Instagram will never be known for Reels, and Instagram will never be known for Stories. Instagram will be known for being the quintessential and the most sublime, platform to communicate some kind of very visual and generally photographic still image or images with video as a kind of a backup. And that is its differentiation. And I think the most important thing to remember, again, it goes back to marketing 101, is find one thing that you are truly different at, and even if everyone copies you, you need to be the best in the entire world at that. And that is what Instagram is. And so there's a lot of copycat stuff, but it's just noise. The real signal is differentiation. And until someone can figure out how to beat Instagram at Instagram's game, Instagram's just going to continue to just add, for example, all of these other features, but they're all nice to haves. The have to have is the cash cow, just like Google's have to have at the end of the day is search.
Well, I'll talk about another service that's kind of raking in the bucks and doing some good differentiation has got to be Netflix, because since The Queen's Gambit premiered on Netflix, chess sales have rocketed, leading some to wonder if Netflix is like a sleeping marketing powerhouse, some kind of sleeping giant out there, whether it runs ads or not. Lisa, are we reading too much value into this one category boost? Because it's not really a brand that advertised on the platform. It's not really advertising, but it is kind of interesting that the power of Netflix was such that it completely transformed an entire category of gaming, chess, and created all this hype and sensation and interest around it. Can that happen for brands who go on the platform and maybe do co-sponsored content or somehow focus on more like less like a native advertising thing and more like what Netflix did with the New York Times, where they ran a story about women in prison. They didn't run the story. They worked with the journalists. They said, we'll sponsor this investigative report into women in prison and time it with the release of the new episodes of Orange is the New Black. I mean, it worked in that setting. It's just like it worked for New York Times driving audience to Netflix. Can Netflix do the same for brands in the marketplace with similar type of agreements where you sponsor this content brand and we'll focus on using these products and you get the benefit from it?
Oh, I love The Queen's Gambit, first of all. I watched it. I'm not surprised that chess sales rocketed after that. I do see a lot of potential. I think one thing that Netflix wants to be a little cautious of is overwhelming their audience with a bunch of advertising. So there's no way I would, say they should break up and start adding advertising. But something like The Queen's Gambit, if they see that it's turning out to be a hit, I really loved Anya Taylor-Joy's clothing in watching that series. They could have had the clothing sponsored by somebody else, or maybe had some things in there that at the end in the credits, like if you really like something, go to Netflix 2 store over here and you could maybe get something from what you saw. That's one potential thing. I mean, I immediately thought of what Amazon did. Too bad they're not Amazon. Whereas Amazon does like Project Runway, and you can buy the clothing that they're showing off from their series there. So I think Netflix
we gotta clarify. It's Making the Cut, because the Project Runway was their old show. But
oh yeah, sorry. Making the Cuts went to Amazon. Project Runway is kind of where they stole the idea from. You're right. So, but in taking a look at what Amazon was able to do, well, they already have a store, so that was something easy for them to turn around and then, pirate from. So I think Netflix could do something like that. I mean, the way I see it too is potentially if they do another series, maybe the actor in the series or the person directing it says, hey, if this really works, maybe I'll have the merchandising rights. I mean, take a look at what George Lucas did. He waived his, his high expensive salary to do Star Wars, did it for $150K, and he got all the rights to the merchandise, which turned out to be a $20 billion business. So I really think if Netflix wanted to do more like with the Orange is the New Black or things along those lines, they want to think about adding merchandise to it. That's how I would do it. I would keep it subtle. I'd keep it part of the credits. Maybe Netflix branches off, has a store or something on the side, or they partner with more brands. What I wouldn't want to see them do is start rolling in commercials or make everything about, trying to, attach an ad sale to it. I mean, to me, when I first saw that the Queen's Gambit was taking off, the very first thing Netflix should do is put, post rolls in and pre-rolls in on that content of their next amazing thing they're going to launch. That to me is just low-hanging fruit. But I think they could pivot and do more with brands, and maybe even do something where they have a Netflix store where people can go and get things that they saw that they liked from Netflix, where it's an option where it's not actually part of the content, where you're not upsetting people because they're already paying for the content. So that's somewhere I would start with this.
Colby, every time this conversation about Netflix comes up, we start talking about advertising because it's in our nature. We do ads. We all work with ads. We, maybe not you so much in dealing in the PR realm, but it's just like we're all dealing with brands that are trying to promote themselves. And what I'm wondering is, what do you think about the idea of Netflix getting involved with co-marketing sponsorships as opposed to doing advertising? Is that a more elegant way for them to get involved with this marketplace and maybe make some more coin? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I know two things to be true. The first is where there's a lot of people, which are eyeballs, brands want to be there. The other thing is that businesses are in business to make money. And so right now, Netflix likely feels that their model is doing well because of the lack of advertising. At some point, if there's someone that eats into that, who would have guessed 10, 20 years ago that you would see a bunch of newspapers and magazines and talk shows that all have all the sponsored content, right? So when money becomes a challenge and you need more of it, which is the other thing that I know for sure is that brands, companies want more money, then that will be the right time. Now, to answer your direct question, yeah, of course, they want to differentiate. They don't want to just have a bunch of commercials running every, 10 minutes of content. There's a commercial. So they'll be more creative about what it looks like and whether that's, the placement of product in the content, or whether there's something that's subtly, co-sponsored by this content's brought to you by brand X. I don't know what that looks like, but I do know that with those two facts that I know, that it would not surprise me that Netflix at some point will turn to brands, and because they have so much power, right? Like, how many millions of people are consuming their content, and that's what brands crave for. So that's my opinion.
Joe, I was going to go to you next anyway, Joe, because it's just like when I'm thinking about this topic, about this whole story about how chess is taken off because of the Queen's Gambit, I kind of feel like they're overestimating the power of Netflix in this. I mean, this is purely a lucky strike. They happen to greenlight this show about chess. Nobody expected probably for it to take off, but they greenlit it anyway because they thought it was an interesting premise, and suddenly it does take off. And chess takes a happenstance ride to the top with them. It doesn't make sense to invest in that type of strategy because that's like investing in in putting a meme on the internet. I mean, who knows what people are going to like and take off? You can do everything possible to make it go viral, but it's only the users deciding that it's going to go viral that makes the difference.
So I disagree. I disagree, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah, please.
And I actually wrote up a little case study in Built to Suck on Netflix, and I did a bit of research in terms of the work that they did with House of Cards, and what it turns out is Netflix is one of the most sophisticated and deliberate brands and companies in the world, and they are using their own viewers and user searches to almost precision project tastes and behaviors and what people are going to like. And what they've been able to do is actually compress the time from green lighting a show to producing the show and putting it on air, and just create almost unheard of windows. So is it a coincidence that a show that centers around chess, debuts at a time when and takes off at a time in a global pandemic when people don't really have much to do other than play board games? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that Netflix is in the business of being really, really deliberate and smart about being able to determine what people are going to watch and what they aren't. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a secondary business in terms of selling clothing, which of course was a meme in of itself associated with Queen's Gambit, and there was a shortage of chessboards and chess sets for a while, which is also a very cool story. Sure, they could probably figure out a way to cash in on the merch, but Netflix is in the business of getting people to watch their shows, and for the most part, they've done a pretty good job.
So what you're really making,
a lot of big data and a lot of analytics and a lot of science involved,
and that's what
I'm saying.
That's what I'm getting to. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is the marketing potential for Netflix is tied entirely with their data, and if they were to take that data and not just use it for greenlighting shows, but also show brands specifically ways that they could raise the market share of that brand if they became involved with this particular program at this particular time. It's not only a selling mechanism for the network, it's also an opportunity for brands to have a reasonable amount of insurance that they're going to get some payout from doing the promotion. So, I mean,
just to be clear, I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm saying I don't know that they need to have to think about. I mean, we've had many conversations about HBO and Netflix starting to advertise and brand entertainment. I don't know that they need to do that. I don't think that's their model. I mean, Netflix.
But you're assuming that they're not. You're assuming that they're not already doing that, because I mean, Netflix has done lots of brand placements over the years and has done all kinds of associations with brands. I'm just taking it then one step further. How do they make it more of a codified industry that doesn't ruin their brand promise of we're just giving you streaming content and not fettering you with lots of advertising? It's just like, how do you do that? And it seems like this is a perfect solution.
You don't. I mean, you don't. It's like the one thing that I still cannot. There are two price tags that boggle my mind to this day that people pay for. Well, the one they don't even know how much they're paying for, and the other one still seems like they're paying too little. One is Amazon Prime, which apparently is in 82% of American households. And the other one is Netflix. I'm not sure exactly what we pay for it, but I think it's like $16 or $15 or $17. I almost feel like I need to tip them every month. That I feel like I've underpaid them, that I need to pay them double just so that they don't go away. So, I mean, if anything, all
you
Netflix
can pick up
I'll
let you pick up my subscription. Okay. You can do that for me. And that way you can pay twice.
When Netflix did increase their price, I think at one point, the world was not up in arms like a Facebook, homepage redesign. They were like, yeah, I guess. Okay, that's fair.
Well, we're running out of time, and I want to talk about this last topic, at least give it enough time so that we can have a decent conversation about it. Nutrition advocates are calling foul on marketing's latest influencer efforts to recruit kids into helping to sell less than healthy food products. Now, Colby, marketing through and to children is already ethically a dicey arena, but do the benefits outweigh the risks for food marketers to use kid influencers to influence other kids to get their sugary snacks and sugary drinks?
Yeah, Bobby, this is a much bigger topic in my mind. Certainly, I think the kid focus may be it may be what tips the scales to be a little more conscious about it. Because I think, having the regulations in place for traditional marketing means, I think is there for a reason, and I think it serves a purpose. Um, the bigger topic that I think is coming up is in general the regulation of influencer marketing. I think it's been around, of course, for I don't know 5 years or more. I'm sure, but it's taken off in the last 5 years. But the reality is it's still the wild wild west. And I think when you're as a brand turning over your voice to anyone, let alone someone who's under 18, but anyone, you're putting great risk out there. And sometimes I think they hope they're putting great risk out there and hope that they're putting it on the influencer, not on themselves. So I think the whole world of influencer marketing is going to be, I don't know if regulated is the right term, but certainly overlooked with much more precision and much more caution than it's ever been, because I think people are getting away with things that they probably ought not. Now, to answer your specific question, I don't think we should say that kids or someone under 18 can't be used as an influencer. I think, there's kids in every arena that should be allowed to make money, whether you're a TV actor or whatever it is, kids can earn money. I don't have a problem with that. But I do think, the notion of potentially using this as an excuse or as a reason to, share marketing for your sugary treats or whatever high caloric foods that you're offering, I think that's a problem. And I think brands need to be cautious of it. But again, I think the bigger elephant in the room is just in general the notion of how we use influencer marketing. I think is wildly underviewed and probably not reviewed as much as it should be.
No, I would agree with you. I think that the influencer marketing community has a number of regulations that are aggressively policed by some nations, but not ours, at least not to an extent that it should be. Lisa, what are your thoughts? I know you had some strong opinions on this topic, so I wanted to go to you next. What are your thoughts on this? And is it worth the risk for a food marketer to use children, kid influencers, to market their products?
Well, I mean, if they're already making the unhealthy food, that's the greatest way to reach kids is by having other kids influence them. So I have a problem with this. I mean, I already feel that, kids already heavily influence each other. And so to me, if they're going to actually go out there and start having kids do more of this marketing, then I would like to see healthier foods brought into play, because we already have an obesity issue in the US. And, these marketers, are only out to look to making more money. So what's the best way to do it? Hire other influencers to, get other kids to, eat, their ice creams or their sodas or whatever it is they're pushing. So it would be nice if there were more regulations in that here, because, the laws are very limited in what you can do, can pretty much, advertise however you want to children. So I think it could either ethically, I think it's wrong, but do I think it'll work for them? Of course, which is why they're doing it. So I just wish there would be more ethics brought into the advertising. This is where people look at me in advertising and marketing as a slimy used car salesman politician. It's because people do stuff like this. So for me, I think ethically they shouldn't. We should try to make foods healthier and, promote to children something that's better for them to consume than junk food. So ethically it's wrong. It can get them in trouble, but as long as it's not illegal, people are going to do it.
That's a good point. If it's not legal and not going to kill you, well, it probably will kill you. That's the problem. Jennifer, any last thoughts on this? I mean, when we're talking about influencers, it's always been that kind of weird gray area. But the kid influencers have been fairly well managed. I mean, I have to admit that. I mean, when you look at Ryan's World, it's just like, it seems like it's a well managed operation. It seems like the kid is making a mint, but not being taken advantage of, at least not to the outward appearances. All that seems on the up and up. But when you get into food, that's something different. You're talking about health. You're talking about
Right.
should they even if it's a healthy snack, should they be involved in the marketing of food products?
No, and I think just to build on what Lisa said, and I agree with Colby's initial point, it has to be regulated. I mean, I used to work in beer advertising, and the fact that you couldn't do cartoons in beer advertising because that could influence kids. I mean, there had to be that level of regulation, and I think the same applies here. So just because Ryan's World, everything seems fine and on the up and up, I think unfortunately my cynical side says, yeah, but as more companies do it and have kids that influence, because they will, to Lisa's point, they'll see that kids can be powerful influencing other kids, particularly in advertising, and they'll shill everything as a result. So I would say the energy needs to be around regulating, because I wouldn't trust marketers not to just use kids to be able to promote their things. Because they'll see the upside in the power of kids influencing other kids. So that regulation has to happen sooner rather than later.
Well, these have been some great discussions, guys, but it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Jennifer Fondrevay. You can find her at jenniferfondrevay.com. I'll have the link in the show notes. So tell us, what's going on in your world, Jennifer? What would you like to promote?
Well, it's interesting. Since I deal in the world of mergers and acquisitions, and we've kind of touched on that here as companies are building and growing through acquisition. During the pandemic, though, the one topic that seems to have resonated the most are the grief stages. I used to talk about them in the context of when a company is overtaken by another and the fact that you kind of grieve the loss of your old company. And now that's writ large with the pandemic as people are grieving kind of the loss of the way they used to do business. And so what I'm seeing in my world in particular, Bob, is the whole discussion around the grief that you feel when what you thought your company did and what you thought your role was set in stone, and it no longer is. So I'm happy that, I guess the silver lining for me is that the pandemic has exposed that aspect of business and that people are feeling more comfortable talking about, the grief that they're feeling, the loss of not just people, but equally a way of life. So I don't mean to sound morbid, but I'm actually just happy to hear that discussion is now happening more frequently.
And that's what I love about listening to you and about your talks about mergers and acquisitions. It's got, that loss that people feel and working them through that. That's kind of what your company's all about. And I love your vision, and your book is interesting. So definitely everybody out there should check her out. Go to the website, find out more about the book.
Thank you.
Now, next up, we have Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at coronatv.show. Did I get it right finally?
You did.
So he's doing this show daily. He's getting guests from around the globe, marketing experts, interesting people who are not in the marketing field. It's really something else, and it's pretty stunning. He also has books. He has his consultancy. So tell us, what's going on in your world, Joe? What would you like to promote?
Well, I don't have too much to promote other than just keeping on trucking. I will have had 200 guests by the end of the year. It's just been amazing. I mean, I've created more content since the pandemic hit than probably in my entire career, and that's for a guy that has spoken in 50 countries, written 5 books, was blogging and podcasting in 2005. I mean, 90 minutes a day multiplied by 5 days a week. It's just been a joy and a journey. And, I'll say 2 things. One is I'm developing a keynote for next year called How I Reinvented Myself During a Global Pandemic, and you can too. And I'm really just trying to focus everything of mine around this one single idea. And the interviews have been fascinating. Last week I had a guy who wrote a book called Breaking Dad. His father was a meek, mild, suburban dad, coin dealer, Turns out he was Britain's most notorious crystal meth dealer. I mean, literally found out that his dad was almost like the real life version of Walter White. And not only did I have him on, but his dad came onto the show as well. And to make things even more bizarre, I know his dad very well. His dad and my mom were coin dealers together. I mean, it's been fascinating. So for every marketer that I'll have on my show, having someone like James and Richard, or Lisa Cohn, who was part of the Moonies cult and escaped the cult when she was a kid, it's stretched me, and it's created just the most fascinating exploration in just like talking to people and finding out about their lives.
That's super fascinating, and I applaud your effort. It's been really interesting. I want to see how it evolves when the pandemic's gone, so definitely check that out. Lisa Laporte, you can find her at twit.tv. That's the home of an amazing podcast network. That's one of my favorites. And I'll leave it up to you, Lisa. What do you want to promote?
Well, I think I'll just promote just that. If you guys are looking for a really good tech podcast, make sure you come to twit.tv for that. And the other thing I want to promote is please, everyone, wear a mask and get your shot when the vaccination comes out for COVID-19. Yes. Other than that, Bob, listen to the BeanCast and download the show. Back to you.
If someone is listening, they've already downloaded. So
Beautiful. Well, subscribe then.
Oh, fantastic. That's a good one. Last but not least, Colby Vogt. You can find him. It's Golan.com, right? Or is it Golan Group? I always forget which one, but it's Golan.com, I think. And it's where you can find him. That's where he is the Executive Vice President of Business Intelligence. Tell us what's going on in your world. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, Bob, I also don't have a whole lot to promote, but I, just in terms of the Golan Group and Golan. So I work for the Golan Group, which is comprised of a few different agencies. Golan is certainly one of them. DeVries Global and Brooklyn Brothers are all three that I oversee the analytics and insights groups for in New York. We've been doing a lot of great work. As a matter of fact, the last couple of years, Golan has been named the AMEC Large Agency of the Year for its measurement capacity. So just, happy to be part of some really great work. I also will just echo what we just heard in terms of, when the vaccine becomes available, my promotion is I hope that everyone goes and actually takes it, because I'm also anxious to get back to the world and operating as normal as possible. So that's my promotion.
And, what you're doing at Golan Group is pretty amazing. I mean, it's just like there is the instant reads that you keep offering to me to do before the show. I'm just like, I wish I could get my act together and take advantage of it, because it's really super interesting what you're doing. So fantastic stuff. Everybody should check them out. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. The first we're going to start with the fair. And I know this doesn't on the surface seem like a fair, but I love this. Parler is such a troll factory. If you don't know what Parler is, it's like the anti-Twitter. It's where all the conservatives who are trolling everybody on Twitter have sort of migrated to have their own little platform and their own little voice. And it's supposed to be dedicated to free speech, not censorship. What that has done, though, has allowed porn advertisers to come into the network and kind of take it over. Porn purveyors and call girls have been using this as a dedicated site for trying to get their message out there. Joe, this is just amazing to me. I mean, it's just like, what a great thing. I mean, as a marketer for these other sites, it's brilliant to have approached this network and started to use it to their advantage. As a troll opportunity, I think it's wonderful to, what's happening there. But what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, why the hell did you come to me on this topic out of all the guests? But regardless,
you doth protest too much.
I see a huge marketing opportunity. Conservative call girls on Parler getting vaccinated. It literally I mean, the narrative writes itself. Brilliant.
Oh, wonderful. Now, the fail of this week goes to how there was a whole bunch of influencers out there who were approached by a talent agency who offered to represent them for a $299 fee. Now, if you know anything about publishing, if you ever know anything about getting your film made, if you know anything about anything with IP, this is the wrong way to go about it. If someone's asking to be paid up front, they probably are not doing a good job for you. So this particular situation, the influencers all got scammed out of $299 a piece by this fake talent agency that just kind of disappeared after a while. Lisa, this one sounds like an obvious duh to me. I mean, it's just like I've known for years, you don't approach agents, you don't pay your agents. The agents take a percentage from they get you work, right?
Well, absolutely. I saw this and I just started laughing. I'm like, of course they got scammed out of $300. Who would give anybody $300 to grow their talent, grow their audiences, etc. So yeah, I did get a good laugh out of this, and it just, to remind people, if people are asking for this much money up front, do your due diligence, ask them for, some references and beyond, because, in today's environment, people don't remember what it's like to go to a talent agency. So at least do some homework, do some due diligence, find out what you're going to get. But frankly, the second I saw that they got scammed out of $299, you're not going to get much for that. So clearly it was a scam. So people should really do some more research than just shelling money out.
Amen, sister. Now,
on a related note, I want my $299.
Yeah, I really thought they were going to grow my audience.
Damn.
Well, the foul for this week, I'm going to give to everybody hopping on the monolith meme. If you don't know what this is yet, apparently these metal monoliths, these metal obelisks, whatever, these pillars have shown up in places around the globe. The first one showed up somewhere in I think in Utah, if I'm not forgetting this. But these monoliths have been showing up. Nobody knows who put them there. It's kind of a mystery. They've become kind of a meme. And now brands are all hopping on board, showing that they're a charging station for an electric Jeep, or they're a McDonald's call center or whatever, drive-through window type speaker. I mean, I understand the desire, Jennifer, to hop on board with this meme and try to be cool and relevant in this time, but it's really got old really, really fast.
Yeah, to me, it's ripe with potential disaster, right? It's kind of jumping on without really knowing who put it there, what's the added value. It's trying to be current and on topic without really having a reason to be there. So I actually think it'll backfire on brands because it's association without really having it be part of your brand identity. It's just trying to be topical. And to me, that's always rife with potential disaster. And it reminded me when I saw it, I thought, wow, it kind of reminded me of the Space Odyssey 2001, where it starts with that huge obelisk
right
in the middle of nowhere. Just bizarre.
Yeah. I think that's what they were going for. But what's interesting is what you're saying. I mean, it's probably a brand effort by somebody, and it may not be something that you want to be associated with when we find out what it's about. So it's a really good warning for people. Well, anyway, it's just like, if you want to discuss it, if you want to get involved with the fair, foul, I lost this part of my script, so I'm just going to wing it. Anyway, if you want to discuss it, if you want to talk about it, if you want to get involved with the fair, foul, or give us a suggestion, comment online, use the hashtag fair, that's pound fair, foul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to the BeanCast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly.
And just one more thought. Is it possible the monolith was a marketing ploy to advertise the new Parler Corgor vaccine service?
By the way, I laughed so hard when he threw that question to you, but I'm glad I was muted.
Exactly. Well, and this is the last time I'm ever going to come on the BeanCast. So you know, I'm ending on a low, which is awesome.
Cool beans.